Welcome to the Rinkside Rundown podcast, showcasing the incredible women's hockey players from around the world through compelling interviews and discussions alongside your host, Chris Sinclair. Hello and welcome back to the Rinkside Rundown podcast. I couldn't be more thrilled to be joined today by Cheryl Pounder, a six-time World Championship gold medalist, a two-time Olympic gold medalist, and someone who has also now continued her hockey career as a panelist for TSN and as a color commentator for the PWHL. Cheryl, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. All things hockey right now, Chris. Been enjoying it. Just been a remarkable season. It's been busy. I think sometimes my family's wondering where I'm at or what game I'm calling. But you know what? They're all on board because they absolutely love it as well. So yeah, just having a great time. I am looking forward to July 1st though, because that's when I will go into my off mode, just sitting on the field where my oldest daughter plays lacrosse, or maybe the diamond where the baseball's happening. But for right now, in the next few months, really gonna enjoy the moment.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if you even know exactly where you're at.
You know, it's interesting to think back a few years ago. You know, I don't even think I would have anticipated anything like this. And so I'm really trying to just embrace them every moment and opportunity that I get within the game, and also to showcase it. I think we're in an unbelievable time for the women's game in particular. And yeah, so it's keeping me extremely busy, in the know, and of course, constantly talking to other analysts, other people within the game, and just seeing where it's at and getting the vibe. So I love it. It's in my veins. It's been in my veins since I was a little girl. You can talk to my parents, my mom about that, or my husband or our family. You know, it's a lot of hockey in the four walls in this house, as well as my house growing up. So absolutely love it.
Well, that actually provides the perfect segue. Before we get into the excitement of, you know, the PWHL and this incredible moment for women's hockey and how much attention's brought to it, let's talk about what was it originally about hockey that drew you in, and is clearly both on the men's and women's side been something that you've been so passionate about.
Well, it's interesting. I started years ago. I mean, I started it with a dream as a little girl. I was about 8 years old when I turned to my grandma and said, I'm going to go to the Olympics one day. And when I think about that, I think, my gosh, women's hockey wasn't even in the Olympics at the time. And so I had what was considered an impossible dream at the time. And I know I've mentioned that on the broadcast, in particular on January 1 for the first ever of the PWHL. But for me, I just love the game. I grew up in a hockey family. My mother loved the game. My mother coached me, ironically. And so it's funny. So she didn't have the skill set naturally to go out on the ice and elicit the skills, but she found someone who could help. So someone who could showcase those skills, because she had a great hockey mind. Her father was the GM of the Montreal Junior Canadians. And so he had an office at the Forum and was constantly going down there and watching the game. So she loved it. She valued it, everything about it. So she said, you know, why not? Why can't I coach? And so she started coaching me. And you think about that, I'm 47. So that's years and years and years ago, where my mom said, you know what, I'm going to do this. And so she coached and found, as we grew up a little bit, and she wanted someone who could showcase the skills, she found Scott Lawton's dad of the Philadelphia Flyers, Craig Lawton, who would come in and help her out with that element of the game. And so, you know, had an opportunity to learn from some great people coming up. And I had brothers who pushed me constantly, putting me in net and road hockey. I think that's the common theme and common story amongst many families out there. And just fell in love with the game and started playing around 9 years old, 9 years old, and just stuck with it through all the thick and thin, if you will. And we've got ourselves to this point today. And I could talk forever about the different nuances throughout my journey. So you'll have to shoot away, because otherwise I'd take us into a 2-hour oblivion of Cheryl growing up.
And that would be an incredible story and an incredible episode. I can promise you that. But you've mentioned a few times rather around the impact that your family had on you. And so I kind of wanted to know, you know, it's always interesting to hear, you know, it's more than just driving you to and from the rink. Like, it goes deeper than that. And so how has your family impacted your playing career, but now also as a member of the media and you know, that whole world? As you mentioned, not even necessarily knowing where you're going to be or what you're going to be doing and all that sort of stuff. What has family meant to you throughout this entire career?
Well, family's everything in terms of, they say it takes a village, and you need support. You need to believe you belong, as Cassie Campbell Pascal once told me. And you get that value from within a lot of the time, your family, and of course the support saying, hey, you can do this. I think back to when I was that little girl and I said, I'm going to be there one day. When I turned to my grandmother sort of was an icon to me. She was a baseball player in the 1940s. She had a contract for Wrigley Field to play in that league, if you will, the league of her own. She said no at the time because she didn't feel that, you could leave the home, the family for what was a dream. And so I knew her story. And when she turned to me and said, Cheryl, believe in yourself, you'll never know unless you try. Those were words that really stuck with me. And although I was only 8 years old, I know it's kind of, funny to think at the time I wasn't aware of it, but upon reflection, growing through my journey and into adulthood and now motherhood and everything else, is that those would be guiding words that would influence my entire career. And so anytime I was in a hole or a rut, as we always go through in our careers, the ebbs and flows of it, I just kind of kept listening to those words. And so they were often provided the support and to pick myself up. But I also, had to shoot for that dream, and it would take my family as well, not only to drive you to the rink and provide the support to pay the registration fees and whatnot, but that constant support, when you're cut and in your room and you're crying and you're thinking about those words that you said you were going to live by, and passion and courage and win and success. And now all of a sudden it's not happening. It's that family that really strengthens their stronghold around you and says, listen, you're not defined by this moment. And, have some perspective, even though you don't want to hear it at the time from those that are closest to you, and just helped you get back up. And so having that support in my family, of course, my siblings, all the way to my husband was a huge piece. I've been with him for 20 plus years. So when you think about that, I feel like I was pretty young coming into it. And he said, I remember getting married and thinking about starting a family. And he was the first one to say to me, do you want to pursue this? You've got to, do you want a second Olympics? Go for it, try it. It's a window. And that understanding that no matter whether you succeed or whether you fail, that they're going to be there. I think that's liberating and freeing to go for it. And I couldn't even put into words and justify what my family's meant to me. And now, of course, having my daughters finding passion in the game, and us trying to be there for them the same way our parents were, and getting the same eye rolls and the same, don't talk to me about that I gave my parents. So it's pretty interesting. It's surreal. And it certainly is the circle of life, if you will.
Yeah, I was going to say it's great when it all comes back to it's a cycle now, right? So you are now experiencing how your family had to handle you, but you're dealing with it yourself, right?
Well, and it's interesting, Chris, because it's different era too. So when I grew up, I always say the impact my grandma had on me that day when I turned to her and said, I'm going to go to the Olympics, knowing her story and finding my voice in her words, really, that she didn't reach for that dream and telling me, go for it. You'll never know unless you try. And so finding my voice in that and having the courage to push towards it, even though I didn't know what that would look like because women's hockey wasn't in the Olympics and there certainly wasn't a PWHL. So, but being resolved and playing because I loved it. I loved the sound of my blades hitting the ice. I love the smell of my equipment, even though everyone would tell you it was the worst smelling equipment known to a dressing room. But every element of the game, in particular the competition, intrinsically just wanting to compete and win. So you look at that, and then I look at the impact of my grandma and my family. And then I swear to you, this happened when my oldest daughter was about 3. We let her stay up for the first period of the Toronto Maple Leaf game. It was on television, and my husband and I were watching with her, and she stood up to the national anthem, and it was really cute, rocking back and forth. And then she looked over at me, her mom, and she looked over, at her dad, and then she looked really confused. And I was like, what's going on here? And she kind of looked at me and she said, Mommy, I think they're boys. I thought, what the hell is she talking about? And my husband's kind of looking at me like, what? And it's interesting because after I had her, I had come back and played and went to a national championship. She was only 6 weeks old. She had 20 aunties in the room and had always been lugged around to the rink to watch myself play, my niece play, And what we realized in that moment was that she had never really watched boys play or men play. And so here she was thinking that the game was meant for her. It's they're not women. And we had this like epiphany, like, my God, she's a product of her environment. And so often when I look at impact, I go back to the beginning, that my grandma, who had never lived to watch me walk into those opening ceremonies, or the great grandchild turn to us and say, wow, are they really boys, or they're not girls? But the impact was still there, right? And so just like the many generations of this league and the many different forms of it, it has taken all of that to get to this point. And so everyone has had an impact on this league, just like the impact that my grandma and her words that day has had on multiple generations, in my opinion.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about, you've mentioned a couple of times now that your grandmother, you turned to your grandmother and said, like, I'm going to compete in the Olympics. You had the opportunity to compete in the Olympics and to wear the maple leaf. And I know that you've probably told these stories a million times, but I just wanted to hear, just for you, what did it mean? Obviously you were quite successful in the Olympics, which is great. Congratulations. But what did it mean to you as a person and as a player to be able to throw on that jersey and kind of fulfill what that commitment was that you made to your grandmother?
It's really it's a dream, and it's everything you want in the jersey. For me, every time I put on my jersey, I kissed it. And that sounds really cheesy, I know. But to me, it was a privilege. It was an honor. And it was representing our country, our fans, our family, ourselves. And so there's an incredible honor. There was a weight that went with that as well. But putting it on is something, it's hard to put into words, the emotion, especially the first time or after a win, and having that jersey on, because there's such a loyalty, that feeling of patriotism when you're wearing that, and then doing it with a unified group, all to achieve a common goal. And so for me, it's surreal still. And I know it's been years since I played and put it on, if you will, but it's really hard to put into words the emotion of having earned that opportunity, and earned it, on behalf of everyone. And so I think for me, it was a lifelong dream that happened early. I got cut from the team and would find my way back on it. So not only the first time, but coming back after failure was probably a real, very, very emotional time when I put it back on for the first time. And I've always said that putting that jersey on and kissing it before every game was something that I always did, because I always recognized that it really was a privilege. So yeah, it's really hard to put into words. Even now, my last games were, before the 2010 Olympics, and I still, my hair still tingles and stands on end when I think about wearing it.
Yeah, and I mean that shows just how much that moment meant to you, and I obviously it's commendable that you were, again, like you said, you were cut, but you still you found the resiliency to come back to, and to be a really, really impactful player for Team Canada. And I wanted to know something that I've noticed about you is that, or one of the many things I've noticed about you rather, is that you are genuinely enthusiastic about engaging with fans, with, whether it's when you were a player or whether now as a broadcaster, you take photos at the rinks, you're engaging, they'll comment on, your broadcast, all these sorts of things. And you're not someone who just lets those things go to the wayside. You actually engage with fans. So I wanted to know, what is it about being able to connect with the fans, connect with people that is so important to you?
Well, firstly, I think it's really important to be authentically you, and that's something that I try to do. You try and instill in myself, constantly reminding yourself that just be who you are, and for some, that's being extroverted, some it's introverted, and that's fine. Just be yourself. But for us and for myself, I remember after games when I was young, it was also an opportunity to grow our game, to talk to people around it. And so I think it's just constantly evolved. And when people come into the game and they watch it, we all have a common thread. I remember Claire Hughes said it, we're all connected by our vulnerabilities and our struggles. And so, but yet we all share a hope and optimism around sport. And so relationships to me are incredible, and they represent the fabric of our society, right? And so when you're at a rink and someone is enjoying the game and there's an energy about them, and you walk by and hey, Cheryl, I mean, I think it's natural just be like, hey, are you enjoying the game? And because I think it's a vibe within the rink. And so we can lend to that vibe. And certainly, you're not always in a great mood, and sometimes, you're trying your best. But at the same time, it is who I am. I really love hearing other people's stories. I think we all have one, and it's ours to own. We stand on top of it, or you don't. And so I love hearing other people's stories, and I love sharing mine because we learn in our sharings. And I've just met so many wonderful people. And what I also realize is that it's a small world, it's a small world in some way, shape, or form, that you might meet someone and then all of a sudden you're connected through some other part. And, one of the greats at it is Craig Button. Anytime we are on set anywhere, with him, it's that you've got people coming up and you're trying to do work. It's almost distracting, because he's just so enveloping of the people around him who are enjoying the game. And why do we go to the rink? Even if after an ugly loss, we're going because it's generated an interest. And so I don't know, I just think there's such a power in that, and I really do authentically enjoy it. So and good, healthy conversation, and people don't have to agree with me, but it's good to have banter. It's good to talk about the why, and it's certainly good to grow the game. And so anytime I'm in the rink and someone steps in and around, I'm happy to say hi. For sure.
Well, and they absolutely appreciate that. I can promise you that. When you look at so as we continue throughout your career, we're now off ice. We've moved into the media. Could you tell me a little bit more about what that transition was like, moving from a player to, now a media member? And was that something that you thought that you were like, what, one day I could be in the media?
No, not at all. Like, it's so funny that it's happened, because right after I had my first child, so I tried to come back and I wasn't successful. And so I'd had my first child, and then they'd asked me to do the intermissions at the 2009 World Championship. And you think about that, that's a long time ago. So really, you have zero experience. You're not familiar with anything or how anything works. And I did a couple of games on the panel. And then you go a year later, and I did a couple of games on the panel. And then a couple, and then all of a sudden I got a couple games in the booth, never having done it before. And I think it was at Four Nations Cup, my first game, and no idea what I was seeing, what I was doing. And it was funny because I could be sitting on my couch at home and I could say, yeah, this is what happened, that happened. But when I was in it, you've got a couple monitors, you've got people talking to you in your ear, you've got cameras everywhere. You're just kind of doing one of these. And you really aren't sure of what you're doing. So I kind of stumbled into it. They wanted someone in the game to talk about the game. So I stumbled into it because I wasn't successful getting back on the team my second go around after my first child. And I guess the rest is history, but it has been a long journey of growth, and kind of the same stuff you apply, and goals and work ethic that you apply to a sport or in business or whatever it might be is what you apply to the broadcasting world, right? Finding a network that will help you, people that want you to be successful, asking questions, being accountable, anything that you can think about. So it certainly comes up. But I think the biggest thing for me was certainly learning how to prepare appropriately, and also getting comfortable, knowing the elements of a broadcast. And then, of course, getting reps, the good old reps, getting yourself there and doing it. Because unlike other jobs, it's very difficult to get those reps in this industry without being in a live setting. And now, a word from our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Durant Barristers.
Durant Barristers is a proud supporter of women's sports and is an inaugural sponsor of the Rinkside Rundown podcast. Durant Barristers provides legal services for athletes, coaches, officials, administrators, and sports associations of all sizes, from minor associations to national sports organizations and professional sports environments. We routinely assist with safe sport complaints, investigations, anti-doping, harassment, discrimination, abuse, and governance matters. We also provide representation on general civil litigation matters, including employment and business disputes of all sizes. Durant Barristers founder Aaron Durant also provides mediation and arbitration services to assist in managing disputes in a timely and affordable manner. Durant Barristers has generously offered their best ever discount to fans and supporters of women's hockey. Mention the Rinkside Rundown podcast to, wait for it, receive 15% off all your accounts with Durant Barristers for the duration of your relationship with the firm. To learn more about Durant Barristers, visit www.durantbarristers.com. That's www.durantbarristers.com. Thank you to Durant Barristers for sponsoring this episode. And now, back to the show. And I wanted to know a little bit more about, obviously you've had quite a successful career in terms of both on and now off the ice in the booth. When you reflect on your time as a player, what were some of those skills that you think that you may have been able to leverage that has helped you to be as successful as you have been in the booth or on a panel as well?
Preparation, probably being the critical piece of anything, is that preparing yourself so that when the light goes on and it's time, whether it's, you call it performance or it's time to execute, that you feel like you're ready. And so the preparation, I think, was something that I learned through sport. Teamwork. What a lot of people don't know about a broadcast is that there's a truck. And in that truck are unbelievable people that do make the calls and get the cameras to the right spots and communicate. And so you have a real difficult time of doing your job well if that truck isn't in sync. And so that truck is such a critical piece. So behind the camera is such a critical piece. And one of the things that I realized, much like teamwork on a team, is get to know that truck, right? Get to understand what their responsibilities are. And, so if you're asking, maybe you're asking for too much, or maybe there's an overwhelm, or there's someone who listens to you consistently, because I'm the analyst. So someone in audio is consistently listening to me and what I'm marking. And so, who are they? Or, what is the job of a director? Or how many cameras are in the rink? And so all of these things that really, really matter, I think that over the journey, I learned that it's a team. It's not about, you see Kenzie and I say in the booth, but it's this incredible team and behind it that allows us to also execute. So I realized that. So teamwork, preparation and teamwork being absolutely critical. And then also, mentorship. What we don't do often enough is ask, because we need to share information in this lifetime, we need help. And so a lot of the time, having mentors that you could reach out to on a whim, who could help you. I remember years ago, one of my first broadcasts in the booth, I'm thousands of miles away from Cassie Campbell-Pascal, and she's sending me a message saying, Pounder, are you hitting your talk back? Are you using your talk back? And I'm kind of like, what's talk back? Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, marking your plays. And so, now all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I can mark my own plays. Like, I can know what's coming. Just all of those elements that I think are really critical. So preparation, teamwork, and communication are just pivotal. And then, of course, the confidence in yourself that you can do it. And I think that's always one that ebbs and flows over the course of your career in anything you do. But I think that's also a pivotal piece, because mistakes happen. You're just like on the ice, mistakes happen on air. And can you roll? Can you adjust? Can you, all of those things, because it is a live broadcast for 2.5 hours. And if you sit and you wear it for the next 5 minutes, you're just spiraling. So you got to let it go. You got to move on. And so all of those elements, I think, come into play of sort of, being resilient through your mistakes as well.
Well, I think that's not only is that profound advice for anyone looking at getting into the media, but I think that's just profound advice just for life. So that's fantastic. And you talk about that preparation and as we now move into your time with the PWHL, I wanted to know, and this is just maybe a little bit selfish on my part, but I'm sure so many people want to know as well, how do you prepare for a broadcast? Like what logistically are you doing to make sure that you're ready for, especially if you're not always covering the same team, right? You could be in Ottawa, you could be in Toronto, you could be in various places. What goes into that preparation?
Well, and it's different for everyone, Chris. And I will say, before I go on to what I do, is Kenzie Lalonde has done a wonderful thing bringing young broadcasters into the booth. And so we're really trying to share sort of some of those notes on preparation. Not that we're right. I think you have to find your own niche, but understanding sort of how it all works. So now that you understand how it all works, I've sort of found my own rhythm in terms of how I prepare, and the same bones about most of what I do. So years ago, Gord Miller, I was doing one of my first broadcasts on air with him. It was live on radio with him back at the Sochi Olympics. And he had sent me sort of his boards, as we call it. So it would be a lineup, right, for both teams, and how he operates under, a legal sides paper for both teams. That's whether it's numerical or whatever, which way you decide to do it. And then you have your information for every player on it. And so I've always used his because he sent it to me years ago. And then I sort of have tweaked it to suit my own self. So as an example, if there's a box that has Poulin in it, then down the side, I would have her most recent teams. I would have updated statistics. I would have everything from, her injuries through her college career to whatever. And so someone like Poulin is highly accessible. So that's easier, right? And so, but for the players that you aren't as familiar with, you certainly try to talk to coaches, talk to teammates, talk to college coaches, to get some feedback on them, because also in a broadcast, it's good to be able to say, oh, I had an opportunity to speak to or coach for 4 years from Quinnipiac, or, and go from there. So there's that. And sometimes, if you're doing an SO Cup and not necessarily PWHL, there's hardly anything on some of these athletes. So it is really important that you do try and talk to coaches and get all that kind of stuff out to be able to tell the appropriate stories. I'm fortunate right now. It's kind of a bit of a pilot for some of the analysts with the league that I do have. I have Sportlogic. I have data. So I have some pretty intriguing data that I go through. So that's really neat. I've already been shuffling through it as we head into the semifinals. So again, but you go through it and you have to go through it daily and look through trends and then try and identify that. And so you're trying to piece together in your heads, what are the key thoughts around the game? What is the matchup? And then you get the line combinations. And so you're starting to strategically say, okay, how does this line up? What is this matchup going to look like? And where are they heavier? And where's the finesse? And where's the puck movers? And so you start to look through it, just not from an individual perspective, but from a team and matchup perspective. And I think back in the day, I only focused on the individual. So you'd see a player on the whistle and I talked specifically to that player. Whereas now it's like, there's a big picture and then there's individual smaller pictures within it. But again, when I have young broadcasters, whether they're in our booth, and as I mentioned, Kenzie doing a great job, or whether, it's kind of surreal that some reach out to me now, which is the irony of that. But I'll say, if you're doing your first broadcast, a lot of the time, you need to have a lot on your goalies because the play ends there a lot. So the director, the camera's on the goalie a lot. So try and have a little more at the beginning on your goaltenders, so that, you don't blurt them all out in one stretch. You don't like, oh, she's from me. So I used to use every single note I had on one player when I saw them, right? Because you don't know. But so now it's knowing that, how to find your information quickly. If it's a new team, new players, and you don't know how they skate and what have you, finding your nuggets, like, as we know in the media world, like something really intriguing about every player if you can. But it is the preparation is longer than the broadcast often. And so that's a lot of what people don't know is that, you're doing a tournament, or you have a binder, you've got a binder going, with the different countries and the different pools, and then you're finding information as you go. But a lot of the work has to be done beforehand. So I mean, I could talk forever on it, but I've adjusted through those original boards that Gord Miller gave me. But again, if I don't have the information on them, then it's my job to find information on them. And so that's where the real work tends to be.
Of course. Yeah. And when we talk about the PWHL, this is a league that hasn't been afraid and is kind of steered into innovative ideas, creative ideas, as opposed to a lot of other leagues that are, a little bit more rigid. There's a tradition that they want to uphold. What do you think the impact of being so innovative and creative and unafraid to potentially make a mistake, and there have been some mistakes throughout the season, but unafraid to make those mistakes, how do you think that's helped propel the growth and excitement around this league?
Entertainment.
Good answer.
Entertainment. And I love it. And I also think there's a real genuine feeling when they're putting it out there and saying, if it doesn't work, we'll go a different direction. And you don't often get that, right? Well, I'm willing to fail in a particular area to make it right, but to really try and see if this is going to work. Like, is the jailbreak going to work? Who knows? Well, guess what, Emma Malte, it was awesome, right? Mm-hmm. And you can talk gold plan and you can talk all of these different elements, but to me, though, it keeps coming back to me. It's different. They're writing their own, they're writing their own rule book, if you will. And so to me, that is entertaining. It's kind of what's next. It's keeping me on my toes, and it's fun. And when you go to a game and all of a sudden, there can be a jailbreak goal. Well, now all of a sudden, your PK can certainly start to play differently. And also not just the power kill mentality, but, the sets within it, it's something. And so you're looking for this. Now your eye is looking for this, and it's fun. And the excitement in the stands, like, is there going to be a jailbreak? And so for me, I think that they got that right. You don't have to do what everyone else is doing. And sometimes, you want to think differently, to be different, and to get those eyes on it and wanting to stay on it. And so obviously we see the ticket sales, recently, for the playoffs, and just how incredibly amazing it's been in terms of the volume and the vibe hasn't dissipated. It's exceeded expectations, and I certainly, I love it. And you see a jail, you're just like, you're screaming into your microphone, right? So it's and everyone erupts. It's awesome.
So, and I absolutely agree. I always say that the jailbreak goal is always great when it's when your team scores the jailbreak goal.
Yeah, not so much the other side.
Not so much the other way around. But I guess who have been some of your standout players of this season? And I'm going to put the caveat on that being not named Spooner or Pouling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Carpenter's had an excellent season, and it really is when you think about how close these teams are. And that's coming right down to the final game to determine who was going to make the playoffs. I mean, that's pretty incredible. I don't think the script could have been written any better. I think there's been so many unbelievable stories. You can talk Daryl Watts out of Ottawa, and the chemistry that she's had with Mrazova and Jenner, and just her natural instincts in and around the net to create, to also finish, and the confidence that she can play with anytime she's in the offensive zone. I think she's a threat. And we always said that this league was going to pop eyes up on certain players, and I certainly think that she's been one of them. I've liked Grace Zumwinkle as well. We know that she's a power forward. And I'm not just talking national team players here. There's been I've liked Sophie Shirley out of Boston. I just think she's got some finesse to her game. And you can look at the Hannah Millers of the world, and you can look, there's so many stories, Chris, that come out of this. But certainly for me, I've really been impressed with Carpenter. I've been impressed with Lee Steckline on the back end out of Minnesota. I think sometimes when you're a stay-at-home defender, you don't get as much credence as you should get. But you look at her, not only her time on ice, but just how she manages a one-on-one and manages the game. I think she's just been excellent. Erin Ambrose, just her vision and what she's done on that blue line for Montreal and the way that she moves the puck. I mean, we could go up and down every lineup, and I could find probably someone even that people hadn't heard of coming in and say, you know what, this has been incredible to get eyes on these players, because in a day in, day out format where resources are provided, their prime extends. And to me, I actually think women's prime is later. I will say this till the hilt. And now we're going to actually see these women play in it with, the opportunity to continue to grow within it. So I think it's just outstanding. But yeah, so some standouts. I mean, I could go on and on and on. You can throw any, and I'd probably, let you know. But to me, I've had a few outside of, the status quos that everyone's talking about. But yeah, for me, Daryl Watts has been excellent.
And we will be right back.
This episode is sponsored by sports nutritionist Melissa Buffunos of MB Performance Nutrition. As a former competitive hockey player turned nutritionist, Melissa's mission is to help the next generation of hockey players optimize their health and diets so they can perform their best on and off the ice. Ready to dominate on the ice? Melissa's new course, The Hockey Nutrition Blueprint, is opening soon. If you're serious about learning how nutrition can impact performance and building actionable nutrition strategies based on your unique needs as an elite hockey player, get on the waitlist today. Learn more and sign up at melissabuffunos.com/course. That's melissabuffunos.com/course. Thank you to Melissa Buffunos for sponsoring this episode.
And now back to the show.
Good answer for our Ottawa fans, and myself included. As we slowly start to wind down here, I did just want to get your thoughts on, the draft is coming up, free agency is coming up. It's kind of right around the corner. Could you talk a little bit about what you're kind of expecting from teams? You can go, very macro. You don't have to go too micro on this. But what are some of the things that you're most excited about in terms of the draft, in terms of free agency, and what you think some of the teams are looking at doing?
Well, it's interesting. I think what this year has done, and it's been a difficult year for GMs and coaches, because you start with a blank slate. And with that blank slate, you're kind of unsure as to how those pieces mold together. And you see it with a team, right? That you can have the best pieces, but if they don't work together, then, that's not. And what's your identity? And I think what this year has done, and in a lot of it, is shown where there's holes for some teams and shown where their strengths are. And so I'm really interested, with the upcoming draft in particular, more so than free agency, would be just what each team looks to take, right? And so are they going for the best available player? So if we look at someone, Sarah Fillier, everyone's been talking about her. Is she a slam dunk? Most people would say yes. But then you've got players like Sir Dackney, and you've got, Kayla Barnes. There are so many teams that need that strong, hard-nosed, one-on-one defender who can move a puck, who can jump down in the offensive line, but doesn't compromise their defense. And so, I'm really intrigued to see how that all shapes out, because it's a pivotal position. So all of it. But I do think, honestly, Chris, that with the number of players coming into the draft, I think we're looking in the talent level of the group. I mean, we're only looking at pushing the pace of play. And so we come on to their inaugural season. It's, it's been immeasurable in terms of the success and the people who have aligned with a fan base. And now all of a sudden you're entering a draft pool of players that are incredible. And so now it's only even going to get better. So I'm so looking forward to it, but I do think that there could be some surprises as we head into June as well, because I think there'll be different philosophies around what they need. And again, what is the data saying for a lot of these teams? And I'm not a big, I'm not a data analyst here, but you do look at certain trends and you can see certain things within teams. Do they need a goal scorer? Do they need defense? Are they not managing the puck? And those kind of things that I think will play factor, or at least make these GMs think about who they're looking to add to or take away from their rosters.
I wanted to end the conversation today by just asking you, as someone who didn't take the traditional route to media, obviously the media landscape continues to evolve, continues to change, but it's still such an exciting time, especially when we look at leagues like the PWHL, and obviously the additional coverage that we can only expect from other women's sports now more than ever. If you were to give advice to someone, or what advice rather would you give to someone who's interested and really passionate about broadcasting or being involved in the media, but is maybe feeling a little bit discouraged based off of how things continue to change and continue to evolve?
It's a great one. I think you've got to inherently know what your passion is. And if you're passionate about it, and it's okay to get uncomfortable. I think, we find ourselves, we have to push our uncomfortable zone, if you will, to get comfortable, and then it gets uncomfortable again. But I think sometimes you have to ask, reach out. Have you volunteered in media? I was very, very fortunate. I was given opportunity because I played, and then I was able to utilize and honestly had incredible people around me who were fantastic at sharing, at helping. But I do think people like to help. And so what I would say is if you think and you're getting discouraged over and over again, talk to someone you trust and build a pathway with goals. And they may not happen directly the way you think that it's going to happen, but you got to have the belief that you can get there. And I know it sounds so corny and cheesy, but when one door kind of closes in your face, typically continue the path, because one will open. And so again, a few years ago for me, I asked. People would say, Cheryl, you have a voice, you've been working in the broadcast world, in the women's game. And at the time, for me, I hadn't transitioned into NHL. And the reason why I say transition is because the women's game wasn't on television a lot. So every world championship, you'd have an opportunity to work, but then, that was it for the year. And then, right. So in order to get more reps, it was like, I need to work, I need to transition and also try to work in the NHL. And it's interesting, I got Ray Ferraro reached out to me and I had a conversation with him, and I was very fortunate. But it's funny how someone else seeing value in you actually gives you value sometimes. I know that's, you don't have the confidence yourself necessarily say, yeah, why not me? But then all of a sudden someone else shares that and says, why aren't you doing this? Have you asked? Don't be afraid to ask. What's the worst they're going to say? And so again, getting the landscape of media. Do you write? Do you know what you want? Have you reached out to local, newspapers, broadcasts, to get some reps in something? So I think, we can't expect to just get that. We have to sort of get that underlayer and underbelly. But again, I think it always comes back to being confident, knowing what you want and being passionate about it. And then recognizing that the path is not going to be linear. Like it's not just going to be woo right there all the time. So you might have to sidetrack and sidewind, but you can get there. So I think ask, reach out, seek mentorship. I can't say that enough, how critical it is to have support around you that not only wants to help you, but will also give you information that will also help you grow. So yeah, I mean, I could go on and on, but yeah, it's not easy. I can certainly say it's not easy, but if you know what you're passionate about, yeah.
And I think that's a perfect spot to end things. And Cheryl, obviously, you've done incredible work, both on the broadcast for the PWHL as well as on the panel for NHL games. You're such an incredible asset to the sport and the media landscape. And again, the fact that you do, you're keynote speaker at a number of events, you're connecting with people. I think that's exactly what this sport needs. I cannot thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedule to hang out with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I just wanted to say once again, thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris. Keep up your great work and all the passion that you have for the game. I think it's awesome seeing you at the game and seeing me at the games, and just, I think you exude passion as well. And it's amazing because you garner that in numbers and it creates an energy that's infectious. And I think that's what we all want. And we're all seeing right now is an infectious energy towards the game. And, it's pretty unbelievable. Looking forward to the upcoming games and whatever that final may bring.
Oh, yeah, I can't wait for that final. And before I start blushing any more than I already have, I wanted to say once again, thank you. And there you have it, folks. For Cheryl Pounder, I'm Chris Sinclair, and this has been the Rinkside Rundown podcast. Cheers.